Greetings, fellow handlers. I was at a trial a few weeks ago, and a few of us are standing around watching the other people run their dogs. And one of my friends said about a handler, she just pulled her dog off that jump. Pulled her dog off that jump. I'm sure you know what that means, but just to make sure, let's look at a chart. Okay, you got the 3 to the 4 and a hard turn to the 5, a left turn. And the handler went past the 3 toward the 4, but somewhere between the 3 and the 4, she moved toward the 5. And the dog chose to follow her motion rather than go in and take the number 4 jump. So I think it's fair to say she pulled the dog off the jump. Well, there are other ways to describe what happened there. One would be that by moving toward the number 5, she cued the dog to go in that direction. But the way I would describe it would be that she failed to cue until commitment. She did not cue the number 4 jump until the dog was committed to it. And had she continued to go toward the number 4, the dog would have taken it and not been pulled off. So of course the primary cue here is motion toward the number 4. And commitment is a concept. Well, if you're not familiar with the concept of commitment, it's time to get familiar because it's very, very important. Commitment is the idea that the dog, from all the circumstances, has decided to take that jump and is going to take the jump no matter what you do. So once the dog is committed, the handler is free to go wherever they want to, cue the next sequence or whatever, because the dog is going to take the jump no matter what. I like that kind of language because I'm a problem solver. And my whole approach to agility is from watching people make mistakes and making mistakes myself and finding ways to fix them. And when you say pull the dog off the jump, you're just describing the problem. But when you say didn't cue until commitment, you're offering a solution. Now, if there's one idea I wish you could take away from this video or this entire series, it would be to cue until commitment. Because if you cue until commitment, you won't be pulling your dog off for no jumps. The third commandment states that thou shalt cue until commitment, but it's part of a bigger thought, and you have to read it along with the fourth commandment. So let me read them together. Thou shalt cue until commitment, at which time thou shalt immediately begin to cue the next correct obstacle. So let's go to our field right here. We got that's number 3, that's 4, that's 5 over there. And you're passing your number 3, and you calculate your dog is going to be committed right here. So as the dog is passing the commitment point, what I would do is I would plant my foot and pivot, turn my shoulders, and start to cue that one. So there are 2 things happening right here. You're no longer cueing the number 4, and you're beginning to cue the number 5. And commitment is the perfect time to make that turn because it's the safest, earliest time that the handler can move away from the path of the dog. You no longer have to support the number 4 because the dog is committed to it. Now you could go another foot or another step or 2 forward toward the jump, and that would do no harm because your dog is going to do it anyway. But if you want the most efficient path and the fastest path, you'd want to start cueing the number 5 right away because it's the earliest possible time you can move away safely. And the earlier you start to move away, the further you can get ahead to cue the next jump or the next sequence. So the point of commitment for efficient running is a very crucial point in time when you're running horses. And a lot of your major handling moves should happen at that exact moment. Like I planted my foot, did my shoulder turn right then. That's the most efficient time to do it. So because it's such a crucial point, it's well worth your time to spend some time trying to figure out exactly when your dog is committed. In the last section, I pointed right here and said, this is where you calculated your dog's point of commitment to be. And the operative word there is calculation, because to your dog, commitment might be a fact, but as to you, commitment is a calculation. You guessing where your dog is definitely going to take the jump. You do that based on your knowledge of the dog and your experience with the dog. Hopefully at this point, you are familiar with the concept of commitment and how important it is to figure out point of commitment for your dog in given circumstances. And I wish I could give you an exact formula for that, but I can't, because I don't know you, I don't know your dog, I don't know the course you're running. But what I can do for you is give you a couple of ideas of how to start figuring out where your dog would be committed. Let's start with the most obvious place where your dog is committed, and that would be, you're going to love this one. Your dog is pushing off for a jump. Your dog is pushing off for a jump, already started it, you can be pretty darn sure they're going to take that jump. That sounds like commitment to me. So let's say you have a dog not too fast and you're going all the way up here and your dog is pushing off. Well, you push off at the same time. Your dog is pushing off, you push off. And if your dog is not real fast and you can keep up with your dog, why not do that? Because everything, the further back you get from the jump, thinking it's commitment, there's a certain amount of risk. But if you don't need to get ahead, why not just wait till then? For a lot of dogs, that's going to work. For a lot of these people are slow dogs, they're just there for fun, that's just fine. But most of us don't want to wait that long. We want to peel away from the line of the dog a little earlier so we can get ahead for our handling of the next jump or the next sequence. And at that point, it becomes a matter of judgment. Now, at first, we can do some kind of guessing or experimentation and see what you can get away with. In practice, and especially pay attention to what happens when you're at trial. You go back 6 feet, a couple of strides, and see what works for you. Then, of course, when the dog is going faster, the point of commitment is usually earlier because of speed and momentum. But that depends on your particular dog. Now, my Anna, here's my Anna, Makriana. She's like a battleship, and she's not so sensitive to my movements. And if I move away from her at like 8 feet out, she's going to take it anyway because it takes her a couple of strides to adjust to anything I do. I have to tell her before the jump what to do a lot of times because she'll keep going. So she's not so sensitive, I can peel away earlier. The poodle, she's very sensitive to my movements. If I turn my shoulder like this, that's going to cause her to move toward me. She's so reactive to anything that I do, I have to take that into account. So really all I'm saying right here is that, the number one expert about your dog and how it behaves has to be you. You got to understand your dog and experiment and find the point you think is a commitment for your dog in most circumstances. Speed, experience, and at the jump. Now, there's one more approach to commitment that something I don't think I'm all that expert at, and that would be training. If you have a send, it's a great thing to have. If you can take that number 3 and say go, and then go to the number 4 no matter what you do, well, if that's reliable, then your training acts as the commitment. If you have that, that's great. If you have it halfway through, that's great too. Most people in AKC agility, at least on the average level, don't have that so good. So training is something definitely to do if it works, and that's about all I can tell you. Other than that, it's important to figure out for efficient running. I'd like to finish my discussion of cue and tell commitment with a common theme I have here. It's that whenever you have a problem in the ring, there are two basic solutions. One's a training solution, and the other is a cueing solution. Because when things go wrong in the ring, a lot of times you say, well, I got to go work on that. And you go home and you practice it 100 times and go 4 or 5 different places and try to prove it. But training is the way most of us think about how to fix problems. But it's not always, because a lot of times we train things and things just happen differently in the ring. So I say you need to think about changing your cueing at that point. And I'll just give you an example. So Poochie, this is my current poodle, and she has more trained behaviors than I ever had before. This is the first dog I got as a puppy. And one thing I taught her early on was sort of a wrap kind of move where I would send her to a jump, not go up with her. She'd take the jump and come back to me directly, like a wrap. I taught this because she's so much faster than me. I didn't want to have to go all the way up to the jump to do a wrap. Send her and bring her back. So she's pretty reliable on this at home and at the practice field, but I went to trial in the past couple of months. A couple of times she just stopped when I stopped. She actually stopped right in front of the jump. This is like in premieres. I'm getting all the hard parts and then I screw up a stupid wrap. But a couple of times when I stop, she doesn't continue even though I gave her the cue to take it and come back to me. Of course, after that, I'd go home and I'd practice it 100 times at home, and I'd go to the practice field and I'd do it 4 or 5 different places and make sure she had it down. But that hadn't worked before, so when I get back in the ring next time, I'm not going to count on that training anymore. I'm just going to change my cueing. I'm going to cue until commitment. I'm going to keep going up toward that wrap jump until the dog pushes off on it, and that's the cueing solution. And some people are so arrogant about trained behaviors that they say, I'm going to make sure that dog gets it and I'm not going to change my behavior. And maybe on a very high level that's good, but I think it's kind of arrogant. And if you can fix things by the way you act in the ring, your cueing, I think that's my choice. Don't forget to cue more, and don't forget to cue until commitment.